Coming up on Network Africa. UN food aid arrives in Tigray, but says more is needed. Tanzania opposition supporters arrested at trial protest. Plus, AU starts distributing 400 million COVID-19 jabs. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shobowale. We begin in Ethiopia, where more than 150 lorries carrying humanitarian aid have arrived in the conflict-hit northern Tigray region. According to UN estimates, more millions are in need of assistance there. The UN World Food Programme says 175 lorries carrying supplies had made it into Tigray. But the WFP Executive Director, David Beasley, says while this is great progress, more than 100 lorries are needed every day for the population who are in critical need.
A fraction of the 4 million people estimated to need food aid following months of conflict. WFP spokesperson Thompson Peary said they need to be able to move faster.
Elsewhere in East Africa, former Mozambican President Jaquim Chissano has called on the government to consider dialogue with the armed groups operating in the conflict-hit Cabo Delgado region. He says there are certain types of terrorism that have ended through negotiations. The former Mozambican president says the causes of the armed violence in Cabo Delgado must be studied as a way of solving the military and social crisis in the province. Mr. Chissano, who was president of Mozambique between 1986 and 2005, he led successful negotiations with former Mozambican National Resistance Opposition rebels, which in 1992 brought to an end a 16-year civil war. The current president, Filipe Nyusi, has expressed willingness to negotiate with the armed groups, but has complained that the insurgents do not appear to have a leadership to talk to. We'll have more on the situation in Mozambique. But in the meantime, still in East Africa, the court case of Tanzania opposition leader Freeman Mbowe, which was to be held virtually, has been postponed after technical difficulties. Nevertheless, party supporters who were turned out on the streets to back him were dispersed by police and some were arrested. Mr. Mbowe has been charged with terror-related crimes. He was arrested ahead of planned meetings to discuss constitutional reforms.
Police dispersed supporters of detained Tanzanian opposition leader Freeman Mbowe outside the Dar es Salaam court, where he was scheduled to appear for the start of his trial. Mbowe, chairman of the leading opposition party Chadema, was detained along with 10 others in the city of Mwanza on July 21st and later charged with terrorism-related crimes. About 50 protesters held a protest calling for Mbowe to be freed before police officers arrived to disperse them. Several were arrested.
Why haven't they brought him to court today? They say he is a terrorist, is asking for constitutional change, terrorism. We have rights. Mbowe has said we need a new constitution, and we, the citizens, want a constitution.
Mbowe, who was arrested in Mwanza while preparing for a meeting to discuss proposals for a new constitution, did not appear in court. His lawyer, Peter Kabatala, says he's been told the hearing had been moved online due to COVID restrictions, but had to be stopped due to poor internet connection.
For reasons best known by the prosecution and prisoner officers, he was not able to appear in court today, and instead we had agreed with court officials that proceedings be held via video teleconferencing. They said it is because of COVID-19 protocols, but unfortunately, the technology failed due to poor internet.
Chadema says the imprisonment of its leader was proof that President Samia Suluhu Hassan was persisting with the authoritarianism of her late predecessor, John Magufuli. The government denies that accusation.
Over in North Africa, South Sudan's first vice president, Riek Machar, has condemned the group of generals within the military wing of his Sudan People's Liberation Movement in opposition who announces ousted from the party's leadership. The vice president says the people behind the attempted ousting are peace spoilers. On Tuesday, 3 generals said they had deposed Mr. Machar and replaced him with the former SPLA-IO chief of general staff, Simon Gatwech-Dual, as an interim leader of the party and commander-in-chief of the forces, a new twist in South Sudan's politics. Mr. Machar had dismissed Mr. Gatwech from his position as chief of staff and recommended his appointment as presidential advisor for peace. But Mr. Gatwech rejected the appointment. He said the declaration was aimed at derailing the graduation and deployment of the unified forces after the reconstituted parliament was sworn in. Well, some updates from the COVID-19 pandemic now. The African Union has started the distribution of 400 million COVID-19 vaccines to member states. AU chairman, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, says several countries will receive the first of the monthly shipments today. The AU's aim is to deliver 25 million vaccines a month by January. Vaccination rates on the continent have lagged way behind the rest of the world. The South African president, as well as other African leaders, have accused wealthier countries of engaging in vaccine nationalism. The AU says the 400 million vaccines should be enough to immunize a third of the continent's population and bring Africa halfway towards the goal of vaccinating at least 60% of the people. With Senegal in the grip of a deadly third wave of COVID-19, officials say cemeteries in the capital Dakar are contending with a surge in burials. The country is in the grip of the third wave of COVID-19 infections, which is believed to be driven by the highly contagious Delta variant of the virus. In the West African country's capital, emergency wards are at breaking point and doctors are struggling to maintain control. Senegal, a nation of 16 million people, has recorded over 59,000 COVID-19 infections since the start of the pandemic, with more than 1,300 fatalities. But official cases have risen rapidly from a few dozen a day late last month to a daily peak of 1,700 in July. Well, journalist Ricky Shayok is in Dakar, joins us now for more on this. Thank you so much for your time. Just give us an idea of the situation in the country. As the battle against the third wave continues, how are health officials coping?
As you mentioned, we are in the depth of the third wave that's been way worse than the first and second waves were here in Senegal. So as far as I'm hearing, the beds are the hospital capacities are full, and the health care workers who have been working nonstop for over a year and a half now are exhausted, as they are in many places. So that's basically the what I'm hearing from people. Testing takes a long time to get tested now, whereas that maybe wasn't the case in the first and second wave. And getting test results back also taking longer from people that I've heard as well.
What measures has the government put in place to curb the spread of the virus?
None at this moment. During the first wave and the second wave, there were curfews. Gatherings were prohibited. During the first wave, borders were closed. But during this wave, we haven't really seen any measures. Obviously, mask wearing is obligatory. More masks are being worn as well. You see more masks now, but and they've been inside obligatory since the entire pandemic. But officially, as far as gatherings, and everyone is being told to limit these, but it seems to be kind of the official restrictions being put in place as they were during the first and second wave.
And just before I let you go, how's the country's COVID-19 vaccination campaign? How's that going?
So in March, I believe they started in March, and there was a lot of hesitancy on take-up for the vaccine. It was AstraZeneca. There were a lot of false information going on, and people were hesitant to take up the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now that we are seeing a lot less hesitancy, and people are going to the clinics. Right now, there's Johnson & Johnson and Sinopharm available. AstraZeneca, we're supposed to get a new shipment in this month, hopefully. But so I think that is all to say. It started slowly in March. A lot of that based on hesitancy of taking the vaccine, but we've seen a lot more people who are willing to take the vaccine now that the third wave is in full effect, and our numbers are 3 times what they were in previous waves.
All right, then, journalist Ricky Shriok, thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on the situation in the country. And away from the COVID-19 pandemic, motorists in South Africa have been hard hit with another fuel price increase in the month of August. Yesterday, petrol increased by 91 cents, taking the overall price to 18 Rand and 20 cents per litre, and grades of diesel by 54 cents, with motorists paying 17 Rand and 50 cents per litre. Economist Makwe Mesilela says expectedly this will further weigh down already burdened consumers.
You say it's going to be on food prices, because back home here, most of the food is being transported by trucks, stuff like that, and we know they use diesel. Unfortunately, we don't transport a lot of things using our train, stuff like that. So definitely we will feel it, because we know that generally around the world, there've been an issue when it comes to raw prices, that they are going up. Inflation has been an issue. So this whole issue now of the transport part of things is making things worse. And we've just seen, even in the previous occasions, when it comes to our consumer inflation, our producer inflation, the culprit continues to be transportation, which indirectly is petrol prices.
Well, still to come on the program. We check in on the Olympics as Burkina Faso claims first ever Olympic medal. That's in a moment. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. This week, the International Monetary Fund announced that its Board of Governors have approved $650 billion allocation of IMF special drawing rights, and said its largest ever distribution of monetary reserves will become effective August the 23rd. IMF member countries will receive SDR's proportion with their existing quota shareholdings in the fund. The approval by all 190 IMF member states was long expected. The IMF's last SDR distribution came in 2009, when member countries received $250 billion in SDR reserves to help ease a global financial crisis. To spend their SDRs, countries would first have to exchange them for underlying hard currencies, requiring them to find a willing exchange partner country. On in Africa, Executive Director Edwin Ikoria joins us now for more on this. Edwin, just help us understand, why these SDRs are so important for Africa's recovery, especially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic.
So I think the most important thing to know here is that when the pandemic hit, it was a health pandemic. It was a health problem. But the aftershock of that is the economic problem. And the economic problem that we've seen, you saw the response from rich countries like in the US and Europe, spending trillions of dollars to re-stimulate their economy. Now, when you talk about this re-stimulating the economy, not all countries have the same power to do that. Now, the IMF, as a world financial institution, basically is acting like a global central bank, kind of printing money. Printing money and distributing it to all its members, to all its shareholders. And that is the reason why to stimulate recovery, to either pay for vaccines or to build hospitals, or to, every expenses that are needed to bring the economy back from the effects of the pandemic. This is what these SDRs will do. It's basically like printing money, or just like a general borrowing from your central bank, or the global central bank at this point. That's what the SDRs are. And this is why it's important the funds are important for recovery in Africa.
Although this is a key landmark for global economic recovery, there's been concerns about how the funds will be distributed by the IMF, especially for the developing world. How can we overcome this challenge?
I don't know how we can overcome the challenge in the terms of the structural arrangement, because the IMF is distributing this money or these funds according to your shareholding in the bank. So, for instance, Nigeria may get about $3 billion out of this, whereas the U.S. will get about $100 billion, even when it doesn't need it, because the U.S. has spent trillions of dollars to stimulate its own recovery. But Nigeria, that actually needs this money more, would only get $3 billion because that is its shareholding in the IMF. That is a structural challenge that we have. But what we are seeing now, or what we've been advocating for at the One campaign, is that these rich countries who do not really have need for this money, because this money is small compared to what they have already spent in their own economies for recovery. So we are asking them to recycle their own, so that the money that is the funds that is not needed by them can be used by countries that need them. That's what we've basically been calling for. Otherwise, for them, it's nothing. It's nothing. What is $100 billion when an economy has spent trillions of dollars in its own recovery? That's what we are calling for right now.
And Edwin, how else would you say, the developed countries, what else can they do, to help fast track Africa's economic recovery?
It's by making this funding available. Right now, the investments that are needed on the African continent by different African countries are so huge, and the fiscal resources, their fiscal base, is completely eroded. Commodity prices are the lowest. And so even when African countries want to put the investment to help them stimulate their recovery, they just don't have it. And that is why this is the time for the rich countries to come in solidarity and share, release their own recycled, their own SDRs to developing countries. We are asking for at least $100 billion of this money that is going to the rich countries to come back to poorer countries, whether as loans or what we call the PRGT. The PRGT is the Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust. That fund has been in place to help poorer economies who are hit, to get access to resources to recover. That is what we are asking rich countries to put their monies into this, so that poor countries can get access to this money. That is the only way they can come right now to the rescue of African countries.
All right, then I hope they're listening. One in Africa Executive Director Edwin Ikoria, thank you so much for your thoughts on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's check in on the Olympics now. Hughes Fabrice Zango has won Burkina Faso's first ever Olympic medal as he claimed bronze in the men's triple jump on day 13 of the Tokyo Olympics. While for his family back home, they couldn't be prouder. Take a look.
Fabrice Zango's disappointing first two jumps in the final in Tokyo left his family watching live at home in Ouagadougou, stressing and fearful that the Burkina Faso triple jumper could miss out on a medal, his country's first ever at the Olympics. Urging him on from their sofa, Zango's father, brother and sisters erupted in joy as he leapt 17.47 meters on his third run, propelling him briefly into second place behind Portugal's Pedro Picado.
It's an immense joy because we experienced it live with the chills, and in the end, victory. It's really an immense joy for us parents, but also for the people of Burkina Faso. We're very proud.
Zango eventually finished third behind Picado and China's Zhu Yaming, who jumped a personal best of 17.57 meters to claim the silver medal. Zango won his bronze medal, the first for the West African nation since it began participating in the Olympics in 1972 on Burkina Faso's Independence Day.
We were really scared after the first 2 tries. We really didn't know how things were going to go, but thank God he managed to recover, and with a good management of his mindset, he managed to make his best jump of the evening. It really is a big honor for me.
Burkina Faso's President Roch Marc Kabore was among the first to congratulate Zango. Fabrice Zango said that he had been looking forward to doing better than bronze, but said he was proud to win Burkina Faso's first Olympic medal on such a significant day.
And now to a story of innovation. 3 Tunisian brothers couldn't afford to buy a car, so guess what they did? They built one. 4 years later, the trio have manufactured the car of their dreams and now hope to open up their own production line. Take a look.
Tunisian brothers Haydar, Mantassa and Salim Kafifi have always been interested in cars, and when their mature engineers got older and couldn't afford one, they decided to build their own. The 3 young men live in Bou Argoub, a rural area in the governorate, a coastal city that is approximately 68 kilometers east of the capital, Tunis.
We have always loved cars since we were young, so in 2015 we decided to make one that matches the landscape where we live.
Known for its sandy forests and rough terrain, the town's narrow and uneven roads make it difficult for ordinary cars to drive through, something that inspired the Kafifi brothers' unique car model.
There are isolated areas that we want to visit in this neighborhood. We thought of making a light vehicle, and we wanted to prove to ourselves that we can build a car like the ones that are made abroad.
The brothers have worked on their car since 2015, spending holidays and weekends tweaking and testing it.
We started working on this car 4 years ago. We worked on it every weekend or on holidays. This car is made of used spare parts.
Resembling a buggy, the light green-painted vehicle has been a success for them, as well as proof that they can make their dream come true. The young builders hope one day to start a car factory where they can mass-produce their vehicle.
And before we wrap it up on the program, some updates from here in Nigeria. The federal government has asked striking doctors to go back to work. Well, this comes as the action called by the association enters its 4th day today. Meanwhile, patients in government-owned hospitals are evacuating to private hospitals for medical attention as the strike continues. For many, the strike is an avoidable issue as doctors are unhappy with the situation, which has been raised in a memorandum of action submitted to the government. Well, we monitored the activities in Taraba and other states. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shuboale. Bye for now.